Hello. So, are you like me with 40 years old on the horizon and feeling like there's some things you were supposed to have done by the time you're 40? Society will tell us it's things like getting a house, having kids, I don't even know what else, getting a full-time job, that kind of thing. Obviously, that's all nonsense, but maybe you're like me and you feel like by the time you turn 40, there are some books you should have read. So I have today 40 books that I am challenging myself to read by the time I turn 40, which is in 2 years' time. There are a variety of reasons why they've made this list. So let's get on with the list and I'll explain it as I go along. So in no particular order, either for the categories or the books within each category. First category, I feel I should have read them by the time I'm 40 because they are classics in genres that I know I like. So they are the classic sci-fi dystopian book We by Yevgeny Zamyatin, and related to that, 1984 by George Orwell. I actually have had multiple copies of this book and I've just never got around to reading them. I haven't even watched any movies or anything, adaptations. These are both classic dystopian sci-fi. Then for a classic mystery, Sherlock Holmes by A. Conan Doyle. This is the long stories. So it starts with Study in Scarlet, but then there's also The Sign of the Four, The Hand of the Baskervilles, and The Valley of Fear. And a bit of a mix of genres for the rest, but we've got Breakfast at Tiffany's by Truman Capote. I have seen the film of this, and I feel like I might have even read the book before, but not recent enough that I remember, and definitely not this copy, which I got from a book vending machine in Exeter St. David's train station. So I have read Of Mice and Men, but I haven't read Cannery Row by John Steinbeck. And since I liked Of Mice and Men, I feel like I should read its companion. Things Fall Apart by Chinua Achebe, The Jungle Book by Rudyard Kipling, The Prophet by Khalil Gibran, and, in a separate pile because it's so big, The Arabian Nights. My next category is books that have been recommended to me from people in my real life, so they know me and know what I like and specifically recommended these. A Million Little Pieces by James Frey. I believe it's a autobiography about addiction. It was recommended by my sister. Consider Phlebas by Ian M. Banks. I have started this one. I'm making some progress already. This is a classic science fiction, or kind of semi-classic. I think it was written in the 90s. This was recommended by someone who stayed at my Airbnb when I was in the house that I had before I met my partner, and I let the spare room out on Airbnb. The Shadow of the Wind by Carlos Ruiz Zafón. I think this is a literary fiction recommended by my friend Charlie. Rotherweird by Andrew Caldecott. Fantasy book, I believe. Recommended by a colleague who have quite similar tastes to. We both really enjoy the Rivers of London series, so I think this might be another urban fantasy. The Dunworth Killings by Christopher Pearce. Does this count as a recommendation? So he was a colleague of mine, and he wrote this book whilst we worked together. And House of Leaves by Mark Z. Danielewski. I think this was recommended by a colleague when I was doing some volunteer work at a bookshop. That's another one I've started but not got very far into. It's quite a complicated story, so I wasn't able to quite commit myself properly. Oh, and one I don't have a physical copy of, but I have an ebook, is The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks, which was recommended by a colleague. Third category is I feel I should have read these by the time I turn 40 because they've been on my TBR for so long. First up, Travels with a Donkey by, I don't even know, Robert Louis Stevenson. This was given to me by my grandfather. This is a sort of travel story that I think, as far as I'm aware, if I'm getting this right, Robert Louis Stevenson did this actual journey with a donkey through, I think it's France. I think it's all entirely in France. And my grandfather was inspired by this and decided to recreate the same route, but by hitchhiking many years later. I've noticed that this stamp inside says from his place of work, Customs and Excise on Jersey. I don't know why they would have owned this book, but clearly Grandad took it home with him or stole it or something. Next is The Travels of Ibn Battuta by Ibn Battuta, edited by Tim McIntosh Smith. I had to study this in university, first year, so it would have been 2004, I think. And so I read parts of it then. And they were interesting, but I just haven't read the rest of it. I haven't read the whole thing, so that's why it's on my TBR. So if it was 2004, it's 20 years on my TBR. The Gate by Francois Bizot. Another kind of travel, like a guy recounting his travels, but this is through 1970s Cambodia. I heard about this book because I visited Cambodia, and this recounts a French guy's time living there when it was under the control of the Khmer Rouge. I went to Cambodia in 2018, so assuming it was around that time that I heard of this book. That's 6 years on my TBR. In a similar vein, The Man Who Spoke Snakish by Andrus. I'm not even going to try and pronounce his surname because that will just be insulting, but it's that. I say similar vein because I bought this in Estonia. Again, just all my travels, saw a book that looked interesting. This isn't a travelogue though. I think this is a fantasy, historical fiction, bit of both. Next category is books that I need to read because I will finish off a series, and so I won't have them hanging over my head as an unfinished series. Kundo Wakes Up by Saad Z. Hussain. This is the sequel to The Gurkha and the Lord of Tuesday, which I really loved. I did, however, think that was a standalone, so I don't know if this was written much later as more of a companion book, and maybe there will be more to come, but at the moment, this is the only book needed to finish that series. And then, definitely the last book in the series, The Temple of Fortuna by Elodie Harper. This is the third in the Wolf Den trilogy. So it's historical fiction following some women living in ancient Pompeii to start with, and then she moves to Rome. And this is leading up to the volcanic eruption of Pompeii, but it's generally about their lives. Next category is books I have been given as a gift, and so I feel bad for not having read them sooner. This is An Unkindness of Ravens by Chloe Rhodes. I think this is a non-fiction about the collective nouns for animals. I don't know, I'll have to read it to find out. Very recent gift, Abroad in Japan by Chris Broad, so his autobiography. Yeah, this was Christmas just been, so hasn't been on my TBR too long, but still need to get around to reading it. Zoo City by Lauren Bukes. A Christmas gift from a colleague in a Secret Santa, so Christmas 2022. Birdwatching by Alex Horne. Another Secret Santa gift, but from a friend. We had just a little friend group Secret Santa. The Decameron Project by various authors. It's an anthology. This was a gift from my mother-in-law, but at my request I made a list of books I wanted from a couple of Christmases ago, actually. And then 2 books from my boss. Both Christmas gifts, I'm pretty sure. No wonder she stopped buying me books if I don't read the ones she's given me. Oops. So The Book Thief by Marcus Suzak and Middle Game by Shauna Maguire. I did start listening to the audiobook for this, but the narrator was really bad, so I didn't carry on. Got stuck. They just did the bad guy's voice in this like pantomime style. I couldn't take seriously. And then my final category is the biggest and the hardest because it is just sort of general non-fiction. I wish I were able to pick up non-fiction on a whim in a kind of mood reading kind of way, but that's not what I tend to do, and so they've just completely backed up, and I feel I definitely need to get through them, or decide not to keep them. So, The Lost Art of Walking by Jeff Nicholson. I bought this for myself, and God, I can't even remember how long ago. I used to walk a lot for like hiking around the countryside, and then I got lazy, old and lazy. The Great Cities in History. I think this is a series of essays from historians talking about their area of expertise for individual cities. God, there's quite a lot of them. Okay. Paradise Lost by Giles Milton. This is having led on from a book generally about cities around the world, this is specifically about Smyrna. Again, I studied history, so I have quite a few history books, but post-university, I don't know, I accumulate them and I don't get around to reading them. 10 Million Aliens, A Journey Through the Entire Animal Kingdom by Simon Barnes. This was bought on a whim. It was in the clearance bin at WH Smith and it looked interesting. 18 Tiny Deaths by Bruce Goldfarb. This is, as you can see, I started. So it's about a little old lady who developed modern forensics, I think. I didn't get very far in. It's bought at one of those bargain bin bookstores. The Orchid Thief by Susan Orlean. I think it's about the development of orchids as a house plant and as a really desirable, popular plant. Much like how tulips had a period in time where they were insanely expensive. I think this is following a similar story for orchids. Then another more recent book, so 39 Ways to Save the Planet by Tom Heap. He gave a talk at my work and I bought the book because the talk was really interesting, and it's only 39 little examples of technology which is allowing us as a society to become more sustainable and save the planet. I just really need to focus and actually just, read one a night or something. Similarly, another talk I went to, Storm and Teacup, The Physics of Everyday Life by Len Chersky. And finally, for the physical books, The Sea Around Us by Rachel L. Carson. This is again related to my work in that we had an exhibition inspired by this book. Had really beautiful fake coral reefs throughout the gallery. And so I bought a copy intending to read it whilst the exhibition was on, to learn about the story behind what inspired the artist, and didn't get around to it. Surprise, surprise. And then a couple that are not here physically, Why Fish Don't Exist and Birds Art Life. I have both as audiobooks because they were part of the Life's Library subscription. Mine was an audiobook subscription, so that's the only way I've got them. I mean, that book club has been closed for a couple of years, just sitting on my Libro FM account being ignored. And I believe that makes 40 in total. So 40 books to read before I turn 40. I think it's doable. Unfortunately, none of them are graphic novels. That would help me get through them quicker. Have you got any goals to reach by the time you turn 40? All right, thanks very much for watching. How do you think I'll do? Do you have faith that I'll be able to manage this? Place a bet on how many you think I'll read by February 2026.